Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. While Pippa knew nothing about the affairs between their families, Archie and Benny knew exactly what happened. Daddy must have transferred Essie because he got into a fight with Mommy. He doesn't want to let us play with Essie anymore. Archie's and Benny's eyes reddened. They had always been obedient and composed in class, so this was Pippa's first time seeing them cry. For some reason, she found herself empathizing with them. Pippa knelt beside them and said gently, Don't worry. The three of you are very close, so I'm sure Essie will come to play with you two very often. Besides, I'm sure Essie wouldn't want to see you two crying like this." Although Archie and Benny were still upset, they didn't want to cause Pippa any trouble. Archie nodded obediently and held Benny's hand as he said, Come on, Ms. Ward. Let's head inside." Pippa breathed a sigh of relief when she saw them stop crying, but she still felt bad for what they had to go through. My goodness. These two are so mature for their age. Apart from being a lot quieter throughout the day, Archie and Benny showed no unusual behavior. It wasn't until class was over that their eyes turned slightly red. Pippa could see that they were still upset about Estella leaving, but she didn't know how to comfort them. She simply held their hands in silence. Lisa frowned in confusion when she arrived and saw their expressions. What's the matter? Did you two get into a fight with the other kids?" Archie and Benny shook their heads. Essie is transferring to another kindergarten, Ms. Lane." Lisa froze in shock when she heard that. As she looked at the kids in the kindergarten, she realized Estella was nowhere to be seen. And here I thought Mr. Farwell had brought Essie home. Who knows? That's all right. You can have your mommy take you to Essie's house if you want to play with her." Lisa sounded somewhat uncertain when she said that. Lucian and Roxanne had practically cut off all forms of communication with each other. Lisa had no idea what happened between them, let alone if Roxanne would allow Archie and Benny to visit Estella. Even so, she could only try her best to reassure them that everything would be all right. Archie and Benny pursed their lips and shook their heads. "Mommy and Daddy are still fighting, so there's no way they'll let us visit Essie." The boys sniffled at the thought of that and tried their best to suppress their tears. Unsure of what she could do to comfort them, Lisa could only let out a helpless sigh in response. Upon arriving at the mansion, Lisa brought Archie and Benny into the house as quickly as she could. Roxanne was already waiting for them at home. The moment they came in through the door, she noticed something was off about her kids. What's wrong?" she asked in confusion. Archie and Benny ran toward her upon hearing her voice. Roxanne stretched her arms out to give them a big hug. Tell me what happened." "Essie is transferring away, Mommy," Benny replied. Roxanne's expression and arms stiffened. "Archie and Benny told me that Essie took the day off yesterday afternoon. I assumed Lucian had something urgent to do, so I didn't give it much thought. Who would have known Essie would be transferring away the next day?" After taking a moment to recompose herself, Roxanne asked, Did she cry?" Estella had cried a lot when Archie and Benny had been expelled, so she assumed Archie and Benny would also feel upset about her leaving. Benny shook his head. "We didn't get to see Essie. It was Ms. Ward who told us about it." They didn't know if Estella had cried about her transfer. It wasn't until they heard Roxanne's question that they realized Estella was probably just as upset as they were, if not more. Archie and Benny tugged anxiously at Roxanne's shirt. Let's go visit Essie, Mommy. She must be really sad right now." Roxanne wanted to visit Estella too, but the mere thought of heading over to the Farwell residence reminded her of what she had seen that night. Lucian and Aubrey were chatting happily outside the mansion. That's probably why Lucian decided to get Essie transferred. Aubrey never liked us being close to Essie. If Lucian decides to be with her, then it's only natural that he prioritizes her feelings. I feel really bad for Essie though. I wonder if she has accepted Aubrey. Roxanne snapped out of her train of thought when she heard Lisa let out a helpless sigh. She glanced in Lisa's direction in confusion, only to see her shake her head before she entered the kitchen. Lisa had seen how Estella behaved when she was around Roxanne and the boys. She couldn't stand the fact that Estella had to leave the people she liked so much. As Roxanne shifted her gaze back toward Archie and Benny, she saw that their eyes had gotten a lot redder. They looked as though they would burst out crying at any second. Roxanne had rarely ever seen them cry, so she knew they must be really upset. Benny tugged hard on her shirt. Let's go, Mommy." However, Roxanne brushed his hand off and said in her calmest voice possible, Mr. Farwell must have his reasons for getting Essie transferred. Archie and Benny weren't having any of it. But Essie will miss us." Roxanne let out a helpless chuckle. That's true, but the three of you won't always be together. There will come a day when we have to say goodbye to her." Lucian probably knew that was coming. That must be the reason he brought Essie away as soon as possible. Roxanne continued, "Even if Essie didn't transfer to another kindergarten, I would still be bringing you two overseas with me after my work here is done." Archie and Benny were at a loss. "What? We're still leaving the country? Didn't Mommy give up on that plan?" As though Roxanne had read their minds, she patted them on the heads and said, Honestly, I'm at fault too. I should have separated you two from Essie when I told her we would be leaving the country." Archie and Benny could not understand why they had to leave Estella. Why can't we stay together with Essie forever?" Benny couldn't help but ask. "We don't have to be separated if Daddy and Mommy reconcile." When Roxanne heard Benny's straightforward question, her expression stiffened a little. That's because the kids stared intently at her, waiting for her answer. After a few moments, she braced herself and stated the reason. That's because Mr. Farwell will get married sooner or later. By then, Essie will also have a new family and grow attached to her mommy. Archie and Benny pouted after listening to that. "Mommy is still unaware that we already know about our births. Why can't Daddy's wife be her?" Roxanne was clueless about the thoughts going through the boys' minds as she explained, Mr. Farwell must have his considerations for deciding to transfer Essie to another school. Perhaps he wants to provide her with a better educational environment. After all, with her family background, she should receive the best education in the first place. She looked away the entire time as she spoke, not daring to meet Archie's and Benny's gazes. Archie frowned. His voice sounded slightly hoarse as he uttered stubbornly, "If Essie is transferring to another school, we'll move to the same school as her." Roxanne furrowed her brows. Before she could say a thing, Archie added, Benny can find out about Essie's new school, and the money I earn should be sufficient to fund our education fees." Archie and Benny had different talents. Roxanne's skills in their areas of expertise were very limited, so she chose not to interfere in what they did. Benny had displayed his outstanding hacking skills in front of her on multiple occasions. Hence, she knew he was indeed capable of discovering the school Estella would be transferring to. However, she knew nothing about how much money Archie had earned via all those years of trading stocks and managing his finances. With Benny's computer skills and Archie's wealth, they didn't need her support at all to execute their plan. Therefore, Roxanne didn't know what her stance was on refusing them. As a result, she was left with no alternative but to say, what if I don't agree?" A solemn expression spread across Archie's little face. Why do you disagree? Aren't you worried about Essie?" Roxanne was rendered speechless. It wasn't until after a while that she barely came up with a reason. Mr. Farwell made the decision regarding Essie's school transfer. Since he didn't tell you two about this, that means he didn't want you to tag along. If you enroll in the same school as Essie and he relocates her again, will you two keep following her around? Considering that possibility, Archie and Benny lowered their heads in disappointment. They yearned to tell Roxanne that they had already known about how they came to be. However, Roxanne constantly avoided Lucian and even forbade them from divulging their actual age to him. The boys reckoned she was firm on not letting Lucian know about that matter. Hence, they were afraid of scaring Roxanne away if they abruptly told her the truth. If that happened, it would be even more difficult for them to meet with Estella again. At that thought, Archie and Benny did not say anything else. Assuming the boys had conceded, Roxanne patted their heads with her heart aching. Be good. Essie will certainly be happy at her new school. After she said that, tears brimmed in her eyes before Archie and Benny even responded. Judging from Essie's personality, there's no way she'll be happy for suddenly having to get used to a new environment. Still, this is the only way I can console Archie and Benny. Naturally, Archie and Benny also knew Estella wouldn't be thrilled to attend a new school. Nevertheless, they decided not to push that matter further when they saw Roxanne's reddened eyes. We got it, Mommy. Roxanne forced a smile at her kids. Let's finish our meals and get rested earlier. The boys nodded obediently. Subsequently, the trio had their dinner absent-mindedly. They returned to their rooms after taking a few bites of their food. Roxanne lay on her bed, looking at the conch shell Estella gave her, with complicated emotions churning within her. She had just been listening to Archie and Benny giving her an account of their fun time hanging out with Estella the day before. Unexpectedly, Lucian had transferred Estella to another school that day. She could easily imagine how hard Estella would have cried when the latter was informed of that matter. Nonetheless, she was no longer in a position fit to comfort the little girl. Roxanne didn't even have the courage to ask how Estella was doing. At the thought of Estella's tear-stricken face, Roxanne felt heart-wrenching pain in her chest. Meanwhile, inside Archie and Benny's bedroom, the two boys huddled together on the same bed. Don't cry. Don't soil my bed with your snot. Archie regarded his little brother, who was sniffling continuously, with a tense expression. Tears brimmed in Benny's eyes. Under Archie's watchful gaze, he tried his best to suppress his urge to cry. Essie must be crying her eyes out, Benny uttered in an undertone. Archie knitted his brows and nodded. That's why we must hurry up and go comfort her. Hearing that, Benny gradually calmed himself. But Mommy forbids us from meeting with Essie. In that case, we'll go there secretly. Archie had already come up with a plan. Benny's eyes lit up instantaneously. They sat up on the bed and discussed their escape plan in hushed tones. Your mommy is busy with work these days, so she won't pay attention to us when we're at school. We'll apply for a leave of absence from Ms. Ward to meet with Essie. Despite his youthful voice, Archie wore a mature expression, looking like a little adult. Benny nodded firmly. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. But what if Mommy finds out? Archie glanced at Benny with his brows furrowed. Mommy won't find out. We'll put our watches at home. Mommy will then think we are home because we feel under the weather. We'll already be back home when she returns at night. Archie's plan sounded flawless. This time, Benny bobbed his head in agreement instead of asking more questions. It'll be even better if we can run into Daddy. Even if they managed to cheer Estella up, Archie and Benny would still be powerless to change anything if Lucian was adamant about moving her to a different school. The best outcome would be for us to meet with Daddy and ask him not to transfer Essie to another school. Benny pondered naively. Naturally, Archie was well aware of the thoughts going through Benny's mind because he shared that sentiment. I really hope Daddy and Mommy will reconcile. Benny turned sorrowful again. Archie hugged his little brother and comforted him confidently. They will. If we encounter Daddy tomorrow, we'll convince him not to transfer Essie to a new school and to quit fighting with Mommy. Benny nodded vigorously. Okay. The two boys conversed under their breath while looking forward to meeting with Lucian the next day. Soon, they drifted off to sleep on the same small bed. Lisa went to wake Archie and Benny up the next morning. Tender feelings formed within her the moment she opened the door and saw them asleep in the same bed. They woke up on their own before she said anything. However, their countenances were pale. Ms. Lane, my head hurts. Having sobbed for some time and fallen asleep late last night, their voices were still hoarse, and their faces were a little pale. Lisa's heart sank upon hearing that. She quickly checked their temperature, but they showed no signs of having a fever. Hold on. I'm going to fetch your mother. With that, Lisa left to get Roxanne. Roxanne had been busy with research those past few days. By then, she was all prepared and ready to leave. When she heard Lisa mention that the kids weren't feeling well, she put her bag down and hurried to their room upstairs. What's wrong? Ms. Lane told me you aren't feeling well. Benny threw himself into Roxanne's arms. Mommy, my head hurts. Roxanne frowned and reached out to check on him, only to find that he showed no symptoms. Archie yawned beside them. Benny kept snatching my blanket, so I hadn't slept well. Roxanne surmised upon hearing what they said. You might have caught a cold while snatching the blanket from each other. Both the boys had bitter looks on their faces. As soon as Roxanne let go of Benny, he flopped onto the bed lifelessly. Roxanne furrowed her brows upon noticing how unwell they seemed to be. I'll let you take a day off from school so you can get some rest at home. The boys nodded and agreed with that. After that, Roxanne immediately informed Pippa of the boys' absence that day. I have important work to do today, so I can't take care of you at home. Go back to your beds and get some sleep. You'll be fine after you wake up. It would be to their benefit that she left them alone at home, so they nodded meekly after hearing that. Ms. Lane will take good care of us. Archie answered in an adorable voice. Roxanne nodded and turned to give Lisa some instructions before standing up to leave. When they figured that Roxanne would have gone some distance by then, they turned to look at Lisa. What is it? Are you hungry? Lisa looked at them with concern. They shook their heads. Lisa was slightly confused as she continued guessing. Then. Are you missing your mother? She has an important job. Our heads hurt, Ms. Lane. We're also feeling tired and want to sleep. They cut her off before she could finish her sentence. Benny held his head with a pitiful expression on his face. Upon hearing that, Lisa stopped mid-sentence and changed the topic. Then get some rest. I'll get you when it's time for lunch. Archie added, we might be sleeping in until the afternoon. You don't need to wake us if we don't get up when you knock on our door. Lisa mulled over what Roxanne had said to her before leaving. In the end, she nodded in acquiescence. After Lisa left the room, Archie and Benny scrambled up from bed. They seemed to be fine enough, given how lively they were. They tiptoed out of their room and took a peek downstairs. Lisa was busy with chores in the kitchen. Upon seeing that, they crept down the stairs from the second floor and made their way to the foyer. They snuck out of the building one after the other after Archie unlocked the door of the mansion discreetly. Lisa seemed to have noticed the sounds at the door while working in the kitchen. The door was shut tight when she checked on the living room. Assuming that she was hearing things, she re-entered the kitchen. Archie and Benny hailed a taxi as soon as they successfully snuck out of the mansion. Initially, the driver was hesitant to drive both children upon seeing them. However, he glanced at the residential area where they came running out from and started the engine immediately after they informed him of their destination. This will earn me a lot, given how rich their parents are. All the while, neither of the boys was aware of the driver's thoughts as they focused on coming up with excuses for when they met their father. After a while, the car stopped in front of the Farwell residence. The driver looked at the entrance of the house while waiting eagerly for someone to come out and pay him. Archie took out $100 from his small backpack and handed it over to the driver. You can keep the change. The price meter indicated that the trip would cost them $60, but the kids didn't feel like getting their change back in their eagerness to meet up with Estella. Meanwhile, the driver was startled by the relatively small amount he got. The children had gotten out of the taxi by the time he snapped back to his senses. Despite Archie being the taller of the two, He could only reach the doorbell while standing on his toes given their height. Someone answered the intercom as soon as it rang. Who's there? Catalina was stunned for a moment as she stared at the screen, on which nobody was visible. After a moment, she heard the childish voices of Archie and Benny. It's us, Miss Catalina. We would like to visit Essie. Catalina felt for the children upon hearing that. Estella must have wanted to meet with them too, seeing how she spent the night before weeping. However, Lucian had left with her early that morning. Moreover, he made a point to instruct her to deny the boys entry if they happened to drop by. Upon recalling that, Catalina had no choice but to steel herself and inform the boys. Miss Estella isn't home. You should leave. She averted her gaze and hung up immediately after, unable to face them. Meanwhile, the boys exchanged looks of suspicion while still standing at the entrance to the manor. Refusing to believe Estella wasn't home, they opted to think that Lucian had had Catalina deceive them. Upon reaching that conclusion, they gave up on entering through the front door and went around the manor instead. The manor premises were surrounded by fences. While it might be a bit of a squeeze, the boys could make it through the gaps in the fences if they tilted their bodies sideways. Soon enough, they secured the blind spot of the surveillance cameras and squeezed their way through the gap with all their might. While it was easy to get onto the property, that wasn't the case when it came to entering the mansion. Benny shrugged and keenly awaited his brother to come up with a solution. Archie furrowed his brows as he raised his head to study where he remembered Estella's room to be. He figured that Estella would lend a helping hand to get them upstairs if she had seen them. However, they didn't notice any movement from within the room even after spending some time waiting there. They didn't see Estella, nor did they run into Lucian. While they were feeling disappointed, a cry could be heard near them. Where did those kids come from? Followed by the question, two men in black suits showed up before them. Benny trashed about. Release me. I came to find Essie. The bodyguards ignored his yells while bringing the children to the entrance, ready to report back to Lucian. Catalina just so happened to come out at that moment. She felt sorry for the boys when she saw what had transpired. You don't have to report this to Mr. Farwell. They're Miss Estella's friends. The bodyguards deferred to her but were confused nonetheless. Catalina, they snuck in through the fences. Catalina felt even more for Archie and Benny when she heard that. You don't need to look any further. I didn't lie to you. Mr. Farwell had left with Ms. Estella early this morning. Archie frowned. Would you happen to know where Mr. Farwell brought Essie? Catalina hesitated for a moment before answering. He had perhaps brought her back to the Farwell main residence. She recalled having seemingly heard Sonia calling Lucian over the phone. It was likely that Sonia requested that Lucian send Estella over, to which Lucian agreed. Archie and Benny's gazes dimmed upon hearing that. Then, Archie asked tentatively, Can you perhaps tell us where the Farwell main residence is? Catalina realized they must be planning to go after Estella by going to the Farwell main residence, which was a huge distance away from where they currently were at. While Catalina didn't know how they managed to find their way to the manor from their dwelling, she couldn't let them go to the Farwell main residence alone as things were. I know the location, but I can't tell you. With that, Catalina motioned for the bodyguards to unhand the boys. You must have snuck away without Miss Jarvis knowing. Go home now. Don't make her worry. The boys pouted and stood there stubbornly for some time. It wasn't until they saw that Catalina wouldn't budge that they turned to leave in defeat. They had been looking forward to meeting Estella and Lucian ever since the night before. In the end, they only wasted their time by trying. Benny's eyes reddened as he moped along. Archie pouted while walking alongside Benny with a stern expression on his face, worried about Estella's well-being. They were so deeply immersed in their thoughts that neither noticed the lavish car driving in their direction not far away. It's those boys. Aubrey's face fell instantly the moment she laid eyes on the boys who were strolling by the road. Sonia requested her to retrieve some clothes for Estella from the manor. She didn't expect to bump into the boys that early in the morning during a workday. Those boys are still sticking around Estella even though she's going to transfer to a new school soon. This is revolting. If Aubrey were the one driving, she would have turned the car around and gotten out of there. She got increasingly riled up as she watched the boys leave her field of vision. I ought to teach them a lesson so that they would leave Estella alone. As Aubrey thought that, she seemed to remember something. Turn around and go back to the small plaza just now, she ordered the driver. The driver deferred to her, turned the car around, and went back where they came from. Soon, the car pulled over opposite a small plaza. Aubrey glanced at the plaza from afar and smiled in satisfaction upon noting that the people she had been looking for were still there. You wait here while I head over there for a moment. With that, Aubrey put on her sunglasses and face mask. Then, she took her cane with her before crossing the road fully disguised. A few hooligans were playing cards at the small plaza across the road. Without warning, a shadowy figure hovered above their heads, followed by a woman demanding in a cocky voice, do something for me." They stopped in their motions and stood up with livid faces upon hearing that. "Who the heck are you to order us around?" The woman before them fished out a stack of cash as soon as they said that. "I'll offer you more after you've accomplished the task." Aubrey tucked the money into the hands of the boy nearest to her. The boys' expressions changed as soon as they saw the money. "Tell us what you need to be done." Aubrey sneered and whispered a few words into their ears. The hooligans seemed surprised after hearing what she told them and glancing at the stack of cash they were offered. "Are you sure we're going after 2 kids?" Given the huge amount Aubrey offered, they suspected she was messing with them and assumed she would have them fight some trained fighters. To their surprise, Aubrey frowned impatiently. "Are you taking on this task or not? Fine with me if you don't." They agreed with it immediately and pointed in the direction that Aubrey had indicated to them. "Over there, right? We'll head over there right now." With that, they sprinted in Archie and Benny's direction. Aubrey was feeling self-conceited as she watched the hooligans spring into action and imagined the trouble the 2 young boys would soon be in. All the while, Archie and Benny had no idea what they would soon be facing. Benny lamented with a troubled look on his face. Archie, does this mean we won't get to see Essie again?" Estella was sent to the Farwell main residence, but neither of them knew where it was. Not even Benny knew what to do despite his hacking skills. Archie furrowed his brows. It won't come to that. Essie is smart, so she'll also be thinking of ways to contact us." The brothers chatted while approaching the roads. The Farwell residence occupied a huge plot of land and was located in a remote area, so they would only arrive at the main roads with more traffic after walking some distance. They only covered a small distance before a few tall young men showed up in front of them. Benny was still thinking about Estella with his head hung low. However, Archie stopped in his tracks warily and raised an arm to stop his brother from walking any further. Benny raised his head to check on what was happening with slight confusion. This is all the money we've got. I can get more at home if you need more." Archie was well aware that they stood no chance against the hooligans, so he took out all the cash he had in an attempt to strike a deal with them as calmly as possible. The boys only took with them $200 in cash for taxi fares, and they only had $100 left after their first ride. The hooligans took in the bill Archie held while approaching the boys and snickered upon recalling having been offered a stack of cash by Aubrey. "Kid, we don't hold a grudge against you, but since we've taken the money..." Archie backed away slowly while shielding Benny behind him and gave Benny a push when he heard that. "A run." With that, he followed suit and fled. It was apparent that the hooligans were up to no good, especially if they were hired by someone. "They must be after us." Don't run. You won't outrun us anyway." The hooligans were startled by their reaction but quickly snapped back to their senses and went after the boys. Given that they were much taller and faster than Archie and Benny, They caught the boys with ease within moments. What do you want with us? Archie trashed about. I can go with you. Release my brother. The hooligans found his demand funny. You're quite protective over your brother, kid. While we find such sentiment touching, money is far more important. With that, they exchanged glances and dropped the boys on the ground before encircling them. The boys collapsed on the ground after falling onto it. Archie was distressed when he noticed the hooligans had surrounded them. It was my idea to sneak out to find Estella, and Benny merely tagged along. I have to bring Benny back home unharmed. The thought gave him a surge of energy. He fumbled for a few pebbles on the ground and cast them in the direction of the hooligans next to Benny. A furious roar rang out next to his ear the next second. Damn it! This runt! How dare you fight back? The hooligan covered his eyes in pain after taking Archie's retaliation. He was enraged. Hearing his angry roar, the rest immediately grew wary. Despite the hooligans being wary of their little tricks, Archie and Benny still dared to resist them. The pebbles on the floor shot at the hooligans continuously. They were afraid of being hit in their eyes too, so they instinctively dodged the rocks aimed at them. With that, there was an opening for the brothers. Archie reacted quickly and got up, stuffing some rocks into Benny's hand before they slipped out through the opening between the hooligans. Behind the brothers, the hooligans snapped back to their senses before sprinting after them. Archie ran ahead while also turning back to launch the rocks at the group of hooligans to slow them down. Archie and Benny used all their might to continue running toward the crowded place ahead of them. They finally arrived at a crowded plaza. The hooligans dared not chase after them in public, so they could only stand some distance away and watch as Archie and Benny slipped further into the crowd. Benny could not catch his breath after running for so long. Who are those people? Why did they do that to us? Archie frowned at that question as he recalled what the hooligans had said earlier. They were paid, but he could not think of anyone who would have paid them. After pondering for a moment, Archie still could not find the answer. He shook his head at Benny and said, we should hurry up and go back now since they might be waiting to intercept us somewhere else. Benny recalled the terrifying scene from earlier and nodded fervently with a lingering fear inside his heart. Just like that, Archie and Benny walked hand in hand away from the crowd and left the plaza from another exit. They halted a cab and headed back to the mansion. The sky had already turned dark when they arrived home. Archie and Benny tiptoed inside the mansion. Lisa was preparing dinner in the kitchen, and she murmured to herself, they've been sleeping for the whole day. I wonder if they're hungry. Maybe I should make more food for them than usual. Hearing that, Archie and Benny giggled and quickly ran up the stairs. Before they could go take a shower, they heard someone opening the main door downstairs. Then, Roxanne's voice was heard immediately after. She asked Lisa about the kids. Archie and Benny exchanged a glance and quickly hid under their blankets, covering themselves tightly and only showing their heads. They injured their arms when they fell earlier, so they could not let Roxanne see that. As soon as they lay in their beds, they heard someone walking up the stairs. Not long after, someone pushed open the door to their bedroom from the outside. Roxanne learned from Lisa that her sons had been sleeping for the whole day. She did not want to wake them up, so she quietly slipped inside their room to look at them. Mommy. Archie and Benny pretended to have just awakened as they rubbed their eyes in a daze. Roxanne smiled at them. How are you feeling? Do your heads still ache? They quickly shook their heads. Not anymore. Hearing that, Roxanne was relieved and said, I heard from Ms. Lane that you had been sleeping for the whole day and didn't eat anything. You must be hungry, right? Come on. Let's get you both downstairs for dinner. She wanted to get them out of their beds as she spoke. Archie and Benny got reminded of the scrapes on their arms, so they refused to get out of their beds in front of Roxanne. Mommy, we will head downstairs later. Roxanne frowned, but she did not think much about that. She only urged them by saying, hurry up then. The kids nodded obediently in response. Roxanne did not say anything else and headed downstairs. Not long after, Archie and Benny slowly ambled down the stairs. They did not want Roxanne to see their injured arms, so they deliberately changed into their pajamas with long sleeves. Roxanne was waiting for them by the dining table. As Archie and Benny walked up to her, she suddenly felt something was amiss. She stared at Benny for a long time. Then, she frowned and asked, Benny, what happened to your hand? A scrape on Benny's hand appeared rather unsightly. Hearing his mom's question, Benny stiffened up. He followed Roxanne's gaze and noticed the scrape on his palm. Upon seeing that wound, Benny immediately looked at Archie for help. Archie knitted his brows tightly. He figured Benny must have injured his palm when the older kids pushed them earlier. Still, he did not expect the scrape on Benny's palm would be so eye-catching. Roxanne quickly sensed that her kids were hiding something from her. Miss Lane told me you were asleep the whole day. Did you boys sneak out? She knew her sons better than anyone else. Aside from sneaking out, Roxanne could not think of any other explanation that could make her sons seem like they had stayed in their room and slept for the whole day. Lisa stared at Archie and Benny in shock. No way. Why did I not realize that they snuck out? She had been busy doing chores on the first floor the whole day, so she would definitely have noticed if Archie and Benny had snuck out of the mansion. Hearing that, Archie and Benny lowered their heads in guilt, not daring to say anything. Taking in their reactions, Roxanne knew she must have guessed it right. Come here. With her expression darkened, she reached out a hand toward Archie and Benny. They exchanged a look but still obediently walked over to her. Roxanne rolled up their sleeves and saw the scratches on their arms. Those scratches were much more severe than the scrape on Benny's palm. She couldn't believe Archie and Benny would keep quiet when they were so badly injured. Looking at their scrapes and apologetic faces, Roxanne could not stop her eyes from turning red. So what happened to you boys? Why are you so badly injured? As she spoke, Roxanne rolled up their pants to check if they were injured elsewhere. Sure enough, there were scrapes on Archie and Benny's legs too, but those wounds were much lighter than the scrapes on their arms. Archie did not want to worry his mom, so he said, we accidentally fell. Benny nodded in agreement. Hearing that, Roxanne changed her expression a little. Where did you fall? They pondered for a long moment before saying guiltily, We were climbing the wall at Essie's place, and we accidentally fell from there. Roxanne helped them dress their wounds. When she heard their explanation, she paused. I'm a doctor, and I know very well how you could have gotten these injuries. You can't get such injuries from falling from a high place. Archie and Benny exchanged a guilty look after Roxanne exposed their lies so quickly. Still, they dared not tell her that some older kids almost beat them up. They knew they had angered her enough for sneaking out to find Estella. If she found out some older kids almost beat them up, she would only be more worried about them. Do you think I will not worry about you just because you refuse to tell me the truth? Roxanne frowned and stared at them. She had been protecting her sons since they were younger and had never let them suffer even the smallest of injuries, let alone severe ones like these. Yet, her kids were injured this time without her knowing. Subconsciously, Archie and Benny raised their gazes at Roxanne. They noticed Roxanne's eyes had turned terrifyingly red, as though she was on the verge of breaking down in tears. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.